I am brand new to leather crafting, but a couple of people have actually asked me about what I'm doing and the things that I'm using. So I thought I'd just go through a couple of the tools, a couple of the materials, and then talk a little bit about my current project, which is a leather bag. So first and foremost, let's talk about some of the basic tools. So one of the things that I'm going to be using is going to be a hand skiver, a roller, tokenol, glue, leather dye, pricking irons, sewing needles, and slicker, a wing divider, a punch, some tools for our rivets. It's still in here, jeez. A die marker, key element, a sponge, brush, sandpaper, and something that I need to replace with a better version, a more appropriate version, which would be a hammer. Now, some people would say, oh my gosh, you're using a crafting metal hammer on some of these tools. The answer is yes, but the way that I'm mitigating or safeguarding my tools is by using sacrificial leather on top of those tools. So for example, if I'm using this hole punch, you really don't want a metal on metal strike, because what you'll end up with is mushrooming at the top. So what I will do is I will put sacrificial leather between the tool and the hammer to absorb some of the impact and save the tool. Now I will be replacing the hammer eventually with something more appropriate. And those are the basic tools. Some honorable mentions for the tools would definitely be the rotary knife, a ruler, a punch pad, a Japanese skiving knife, an edge beveler, wire cutters, a good pair of scissors, and of course, a cutting surface. So for this project, let's talk about the leather. So what I've selected for this leather, or for this project, excuse me, is this dark, beautiful dark brown full grain leather. It's 4 to 4.5 ounce for thickness, and it's got this beautiful cherry red pull-up. Now, something that I'll caution you is that when you're doing, you're crushing the leather to give it that sort of, crushed look, there's some things that you need to be aware of, especially if you've got a project, you've cut all your pieces out, and then you're like, okay, well, let me go ahead and start crushing it, and I'm going to make it look awesome. One of the things that you need to be concerned about is if your leather has any scars on the back, such as this. So you see this hooked scar here, there's another scar here, everything else over here looks okay. If you start doing your crushing like this with your leather, and you hit one of those scars, what's going to happen, let's see if I can find it here. Look at that. Okay, that immediately matches up with that scar. Same thing on this other side. And you can actually see the hook shape in the leather, and it might not be so obvious, but you really want to be careful about that, because if you're doing any kind of crumpling and whatnot to add the character to the leather, you're going to end up with these splits. So just be aware of that. So for this project, I also have a couple of, I'll say, accessory pieces that I've been working on first, which is the straps. There's going to be a keychain holder. And also on the inside, there's going to be a pocket. So all of this has been hand stitched. I don't own a sewing machine. So the thread that I'm using is bonded nylon, which is this beautiful copper sort of tone. Very, very strong. Also, what I'm doing is I'm gluing the edges right up to where the stitch line is going to be. So this is not waxed thread. This is just, like I said, bonded nylon. So it's not going to sort of hold itself with the friction. So what I'm doing is I'm actually gluing along the edge. I'm burnishing and gluing along the edge for the stitch line. Now the burnishing doesn't add to the structural integrity of it. It just makes the edges look nice. So the natural edge of this leather, looks like this to begin with right here. But once you've beveled it, you've added toconol, you've slicked it, you've dyed it, you've slicked it again, you end up with this, right? Nice and shiny, beautiful edges. Also, what I'm doing to this is that I'm also rolling some of the edges. So you see I've actually burnished this edge, but I've rolled this edge here. And I have another piece that I can use, sort of a sacrificial piece, on how I did the rolling. So this was a test piece. So I used my hand skiver to thin the leather so that it makes it easy to fold. If you don't skive the leather before you fold it like this, so you get a nice clean fold like this edge here, what you're going to end up doing, let's just take this piece of leather and let's just fold it over like we would try to do it. Number one, you're not going to get a nice rollover. And number two, it's going to be so thick, it's going to be difficult to work with. So this is why we split or skive to thin out the leather and make it easier to roll over. But it makes very, very nice edges once you have it completed and you've got it glued down. So this is a finished edge. I'll show you an edge that's currently in process. So here's one that has already been rolled, one of the panel pieces, right? Again, I'm hand skiving, so you're going to have little imperfections. If I had a machine skiver that would basically just strip off or split the edge of the leather, then this would probably be more uniform, but these little imperfections are basically as a result of doing the hand skiving. And then once that's done, then I'll go back and stitch the edge like this, right? Now, for two of the panels that I'm going to be sewing together, you actually have to do an additional step. So when you're connecting those panels together, you actually have to score the leather, and I just use sandpaper. There's roughing tools out there, but I'm just using sandpaper for this project, and this one's not even done. I need to finish down here. But you're basically going to sandpaper this so that the glue will have something to stick to. We'll put one of the panels on top of that, and then we'll stitch the two panels together. So that's how I'm planning on stitching the multiple panels together for the project. Also, just as an added note, this is all being done with saddle stitching. So you'll see I come through and then I stitch back a couple of times. And then the way that I finish the thread is actually by using a thread zapper, which is probably one of the best tools that I've come across. Because it's bonded nylon, you push that button to heat it up and it'll actually just melt the thread. See if you can actually see this. Just melt the thread right down, like so. And then once it's melted, or once it's nice and hot, you can actually press it back into the leather and you've got nice, clean edges. So this would be the back. You can barely even tell. Looks very nice.